a segment that we are calling Looper Island. Guys, there's been so much movement, so much drama with the caddies, and it got us thinking. This reminds us of another show capturing the hearts of America, introducing Looper Island.
Tonight, on Looper Island.
I don't get why you would make me sound bad.
They spend time together. They battle together. But do they work together? More recouplings.
I have to stand up for myself because I'm not going to let someone just throw little jabs at me.
What happens when a hot new bombshell comes on tour?
Go off the right.
They
I don't want to hit it.
change
We want it landing right at it.
that.
Oh, fantastic work. Absolutely fantastic. Alex Bush deserves a big round of applause.
Bush, man.
We had an idea early in the week. We said, man, this is really starting to feel like Love Island with all of the drama. And it is. And we had an idea to make a Love Island promo, and Alex Bush took it from there and he ran with it. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to start with the Collin Morikawa situation. So Collin's had, I have a little diagram here too. I'm going to run through all of the recouplings. We're going to get to that after we talk about Collin. So Collin has JJ Jakovac on the bag for 6 years. His their first tournament together was his sectional qualifier for the U.S. Open 2019, which he made it through. And been with him through all of his wins, his two majors. He parts ways with him. He hires Joe Greiner. We had him on the show explaining that decision. Big news, Joe Greiner was with Max Homa forever. 5 events later, Collin splits with Joe Greiner. Shows up to the Rocket Don't Say Mortgage Classic with buddy KK Limbasuit on the bag. By the way, Collin finished in tie for 8th, $261,000. So 8% of that, if we're assuming kind of a normal agreement, is $20,928 for the fill-in caddy. In 9 starts so far on the Korn Ferry Tour this year, he'd made $21,669. So he doubled his earnings in 1 week. So big week for him. So news first starts to spread that Collin and Joe are no longer, and a reporter, Adam Schupak from Golf Week, who is a different human being than Alan Shipnuck, which is going to be part of this story. He walks up to Collin on the first tee of the Pro-Am. And this is a little bit of a no-go for me personally. I try not to walk up to someone on the first tee of the Pro-Am for the reasons that Collin gets into. But Collin confirms that he's not done with Joe, and he says, I'll talk to you at the presser. Schupak then writes a story not just confirming that he's gone, but using that quote, like, I'll talk to you in a few hours, I'm playing at the Pro-Am. And then here was Collin at the press conference before the tournament.
I don't. And, you know, I read your article that you wrote. Look, I'm not here to tell people how to do their jobs, but I don't get why you would make me sound bad because you put out my quote that I was playing with Pro-Am partners out front. Those guys are paying a lot of money. They're very important to the community. They're very important to the Rocket Classic. And for you to put out a quote like that, to put me down and saying, hey, wait 2.5 hours, I mean, you called me up on the first tee, you know? So I'm not going to tell you how to do your job. You can write whatever you want. This is America. But don't put me down like that because it's 2.5 hours, Adam.
I thought I was actually giving you credit that you were focused on your Pro-Am partners.
Okay, we can all read it very differently. That's not how I read it. I don't know how, but I'm just telling you, like, I think there's a perspective where people can read it like that. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
So he's hypersensitive, given the Bay Hill and all the conversations that have been happening about his media. What I think he was angry about was not the fact that he came up to him necessarily and he said, yeah, it's true, whatever. It was that he included the quote in the story. Mm-hmm. Like, if I go up to someone and I say, hey, is this true? And they say, yeah, but, like, let's talk about it later. I would just say it's true. I wouldn't use the let's talk about it later.
Exactly.
You know, like, that's a human interaction where you came up to him and he was like, I'm happy to answer your questions, but I'm not going to do it in this setting. To then go and write exactly what he said in that situation, you know, it's not my favorite move in the world. Your thoughts? We have another clip to get through, but I want to hear your thoughts on that first.
No, I totally agree. First of all, they edited the quote out of the story afterward, which was the first kind of thing I thought was weird about this. Like, first of all, it wasn't that incendiary of a quote. However, if you look at it in context, and you've written these pieces before, I've written pieces like this before, like, it's very clear that he put it in there as a jab. That's how I read it, as a jab. So I don't blame Collin for thinking that it's a jab.
It just felt like a needless detail. It was like you had the story. You were going to be able to ask him questions a couple hours later. Did you really need to publicize this sort of like human interaction you had with someone who I can imagine Collin's in the first tee and he's like, I'll talk to you in a bit. You know, like he was clearly sort of saying like, we'll handle this later.
Yeah. The other weird thing is that he defends including the quote by saying like, oh, it was like a kudos to you. It was like giving you credit. Well, why did the quote then come out of the story later?
Right.
That's in the lead of, like, nobody's not going to notice that the story became a story. You can't take the quote out of the lead of the article and then expect people not to like notice that. So that was also a little bit weird.
Right. Okay. Let's then. So he plays on Thursday and then speaks to media again. Let's watch this.
At a point, you can only follow so much, and you have to stand up for yourself. Look, this has happened twice between me and Alan. Like it hasn't happened between anyone else. Like a lot of other reporters, media. I respect everyone. This whole idea that I don't do it. I mean, I've looked up how many times I've finished second. It's not once, and you know, I think for me I think I have to stand up for myself because I'm not going to let someone just throw little jabs at me, and just make me into someone I'm not. Because I know who I am, and that's all that matters. I know my people, my team, my family know who I am. But this whole perception out there right now is just it's a little ridiculous. And granted, you know, we've seen a few players do it as well, but that's not who I am. Like I am here for you guys, but it's just, you know, did it one time and so be it.
So I got a few takeaways. Number one, he's mad at Adam Schupak, not Alan Shipnuck. He said that. He said,
Let the record state.
Let the record show that Adam Schupak and Alan Shipnuck are different people. It is kind of breathtaking how similar their names are and that they both are on the golf beat. But look, he got hammered for not talking after Bay Hill, and now he is talking and actually expressing his opinion, and he's getting hammered for that as well. I actually don't have a problem with this whole interaction. Like, we want our athletes to be honest. If you don't like what he said, that's fine. That's part of this whole ecosystem, and now we're talking about it. And I'm not saying that everything's content, but this is what we want from athletes. We want like human sort of stories. It makes the ecosystem richer. And he was annoyed by that, and he was annoyed by the perception of him not talking for media, and he went back. And Collin's definitely, I mean, I know him decently well. He's a stubborn kid. Like, he's got a little bit of that, like, I'll show you mentality, which I think is really good for the golf course. But he's a good guy, and I think he's having a rough go with the media, and I think he was trying to show a sort of human side of like, actually, this isn't right what you guys are doing, and I had no issues with it.
We've written, what, like between two of us, hundreds of thousands of words probably, and this is a case of like, you don't think that they read what we write, and I like that he said like, yeah, I read what you write. I think that's good for our sport and for the interaction with the media. Like, I know typically in journalism, you're like, don't let the story become the story, but I think in pro golf, if more stories start becoming stories and we can like interact with the players about that, that's a good thing for the sport.
I think it's just a net positive, and I hope Collin's not too upset, but I don't
think he's upset. I think I think he won this argument in my mind.
It's not a competition, but it was good. Like, I appreciate him speaking his mind. If we're going to hammer a guy for not talking, then you can't necessarily hammer him when he speaks his mind. You can choose not to like what he says, but...
And I think context is important. Like, that quote was put in that story in a context that was to deliberately, in my reading, make Collin seem standoffish or dismissive. And he wasn't being that. He was just had his priorities straight. And maybe he shouldn't have been asked that question at that time.
I agree. I think that's a nice nuanced take. So, speaking of Looper Island, we have a bunch of recouplings. These are our Islanders, okay? We've got Collin Morikawa, Justin Thomas, Patrick Cantlay, Tiger Woods, Max Homa, and young boy, Michael Thorbjornsen, the bombshell, the new bombshell on tour. And then we've got the caddies. We've got JJ Jakovac, Joe Greiner, Joe LaCava, Matt Minister, and Lance Bennett. And we're about to see the ties that bind here. So this all sort of starts with Tiger Woods and Joe LaCava. It's a beautiful relationship, right? Close my laptop. It's a beautiful relationship. We've got Tiger Woods and Joe LaCava. Tiger Woods gets injured, and Joe LaCava decides that he needs to find work. He needs more consistent work. So Joe LaCava says, Tiger, it's been an amazing run. We won the Masters together, but I'm going to work for Patrick Cantlay. Patrick Cantlay, why did Patrick Cantlay have a vacancy on his bag? Patrick Cantlay had a vacancy on his bag because he used to work with Matt Minister for many years. They won the FedEx Cup together, but they broke up. So Matt Minister and Cantlay are done. Tiger and Joey are done. Cantlay takes Minister. Tiger Woods, when he plays in the few events that he does, he now goes to work with Lance Bennett. Lance Bennett, Tiger Woods. Justin Thomas is in this story. Why is Justin Thomas in this story? Well, he had Jim Bones Mackay on his bag when he won the 2022 PGA Championship. He splits with Bones, and there's a guy named Matt Minister who's now looking for a job because Matt Minister used to work with Patrick Cantlay. So now we've got Justin Thomas with an arrow to Matt Minister. So we've got three guys who are kind of lingering here, and we're going to bring in Joe Greiner. Joe Greiner is an absolutely essential piece to this, you know, turning a lot of heads in the villa. Max Homa is with Joe Greiner for many, many years. They're best friends. They have a very high-profile split earlier this year. Max Homa hires one guy who didn't make it on this list, I can't remember his name, and then eventually ends up with Lance Bennett. Joe Greiner is with Max Homa, and Justin Thomas, Matt Minister, has an illness. So this is not a Casa Amor situation. He just has an illness. And Justin Thomas hooks up, and we're going to do a dotted line here with Joe Greiner because it was just for a couple events, but they got a win together at the RBC Heritage. Why is Michael Thorbjornsen in here? Well, Lance Bennett had a pretty similar situation with Tiger Woods where he's working for Tiger Woods, but Tiger Woods, especially after this injury, just isn't playing very often. So Lance Bennett goes to work for Michael Thorbjornsen. Michael Thorbjornsen is working with Lance Bennett, but then decides, okay, and let's get to Collin Morikawa. So Collin Morikawa has J.J. Jakovac on his bag for his entire career up until a couple months ago. They split up. We're going to do a full dotted line here because it was a full-time thing, or at least was supposed to be, but it only lasted 5 events. So it's not a dotted line like Justin Thomas to Joe Greiner, but Joe Greiner has Collin Morikawa, Max Homa, and Justin Thomas. Michael Thorbjornsen, once Collin Morikawa splits with J.J. Jakovac has shepherded a young player from, you know, the collegiate ranks to being a top 5 player in the world. He's done it with Collin Morikawa, and he wants to do it again with Michael Thorbjornsen. So Michael Thorbjornsen hires J.J. Jakovac. And here is where we are. I think we have, do we have everything? Yep, we have it all. Collin Morikawa's got ties to J.J. Jakovac and Joe Greiner. Justin Thomas has ties to Joe Greiner and Matt Minister. Patrick Cantlay has ties to Joe LaCava and Matt Minister. Tiger Woods has ties to Joe LaCava and Lance Bennett. Max Homa has ties to Joe Greiner and wait, who does he? And Lance Bennett. Sorry, and Lance Bennett. And Michael Thorbjornsen has ties to J.J. Jakovac and Lance Bennett.
What a tangled web they weave.
This is the web. This is it. These are all the ties that bind on Looper Island. It's been an electric season in the villa, in the clubhouse. We're going to get some new bombshells coming next year, you know? You never know what's going to happen on Looper Island. So just a fun little thing. And I actually wanted to look at, is this common, like all of this caddy changing? So I pulled up the top 10 players in the world on Data Golf. I did not use the official World Golf Ranking. Why did I not use it, Andy? Because the official World Golf Ranking is now officially, again,
utter woke nonsense.
it's utter woke nonsense. It means nothing. So the top 10. So we start with Scottie Scheffler. So this is how many caddies they've all had since 2020. Scottie Scheffler's had 2. He had Scott McGinnis and then switched to Ted Scott after the 2021 Ryder Cup. John Rahm's had 1. He's had Adam Hayes really since he's been a professional in 2016. Bryson DeChambeau has had 2. It was Tim Tucker and then Greg Bodine, who he's been with for a while now. Rory McIlroy's had 1. He's had Harry Diamond since 2017. Xander Schauffele, another guy who's had 1 caddy. He's not in the top 10 right now, but he's been with Austin Kaiser for basically his whole career. Tommy Fleetwood's had 1. He's had Ian Finnis since 2016. Russell Henley's had 2. Todd Yesvold, then Andy Sanders. Justin Thomas has had 3, and I'm not counting Joe Greiner because that was not a full-time thing. He's had Jimmy Johnson, Bones Mackay, and then Matt Minister. Joaquin Neiman's had 1. Gary Matthews. Keegan Bradley's had 1. Scotty Vail since 2017. And Collin Morikawa's had J.J. Jakovac, Joe Greiner, and to be continued. So it's not all that often that top guys switch, which is why it's felt like a particularly active year on Looper Island.
Pretty fun to be going through the top 10 and just see like Keegan Bradley, number 9.
Number 9, baby. Number 9. He's the real deal.